Hello there everybody and welcome back to Movie Squirm. Today is going to be another recent Horror Watches episode where I just talk about a bunch of horror movies that I've watched since the last video, and I usually like to keep this to 10 movies each time, but we've got actually 13 movies in here just the way it's worked out. Also, I know it's been a while since I've done one of these, but I have actually watched a hell of a lot more than 13 horror movies. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of them were franchises. So I done The Omen. I watched all of them movies, but I have actually done a review for each one of them films. I've ranked it in another video. Don't really need to talk about it a hell of a lot more again here. Also, I've watched nearly all of the Friday the 13th films in between this. However, I do have a series planned, a review series for that, and I'm also going to be getting on a stream with a bunch of my friends going through each one of them movies, and we'll all be ranking them at the end. So hopefully there's going to be some Friday the 13th content coming very soon. And I'm going to race through all the films again just to perfect my reviews a little bit, but I do actually want to go through them all again because they're just so easy to watch. And also, I know it doesn't really count as full horror. It's kids horror comedy, but I also watched a lot of the Ghostbusters movies and I've ranked them on the channel, reviewed all them. So there's a ton of movies I've watched here that have got their own sort of place on the channel, and I'll leave them playlists down below if you want to check them out. Now, a lot of the movies here I am going to talk about I have reviewed on the channel, but they are sort of single standalone films, apart from one little franchise in here. Enough of the babble, enough of the the trailer, intro here, whatever you want to call it. Let's just get into it for what you all came here for. So the first movie I watched since the last video is Lisa Frankenstein, and yes, I have reviewed this one on the channel. This is a horror comedy starring Kathryn Newton, who basically is a little bit of a weirdo in the school. She is the outcast, and she is in love, or she's obsessed, sorry, with this corpse that is buried in a local cemetery. And she wants to sort of bring that back to life. And she does go about her business and bring this corpse back to life. And it's sort of a dark adventure ensues. It's a very, very silly. It is Zelda Williams' directional debut, the daughter of Robin Williams. And I thought she'd done a really good job with the visual style of this film. It's a very colourful movie. It takes place in 1989 and all the colours pop like an 80s movie should. But she knows how to tone it down a little bit for the more darker scenes. And the movie is really funny at times, but also it's kind of gory as well. So it sort of puts you back in your seat for the horror after you've been laughing a little bit there. Sort of gets the balance right, I feel. And there's lots of side characters here who are fun to be around as well, especially her stepmother, who is just really horrible to her, but it's kind of fun to watch how ridiculous she is. They're kind of cartoon characters a little bit here, the way they act and stuff. I don't think it was anything spectacular. It's more of a linear movie. It's a very simple story, something that you might have seen before. It plays on the Frankenstein theme, the Frankenstein story, and puts its own little twist on it there. But I had a fun time with it. I think Kathryn Newton brings a good personality to a lot of movies that she's in. She's one of them with screen presence, I suppose. And it was fun to see these two on screen together. I forgot the actor's name who plays, the corpse, but he was in Big Daddy. He was, Sonny's stepson that he adopted, and he was also in Friends as Ross Geller's son Ben. Cole Sprouse, I think his name is. Yes, he done a great job of mimicking this dead body walking around. It kind of reminded me of Billy from Hocus Pocus a little bit there. So yeah, it was a fun time. People saying this is destined to become a cult classic. I'm not quite sure about that. I'm sure we'll find out in 10 years time. But Lisa Frankenstein, which unfortunately has bombed at the box office compared to a lot of horror movies that have come out this year. I think this is the least grossing horror movie. It was sadly one of the better ones because there's not been a lot of great stuff coming out this year, but it's definitely recommended from me if you like a horror comedy. So that is Lisa Frankenstein. Next up, we have a movie that is definitely one of my least favourite horror movies of the year, and just one of my least favourite movies in general of 2024, and that is Imaginary. This was actually on my most anticipated horror movies of the year list. I just like the look of this teddy bear coming alive and sort of doing the dark stuff behind the scenes, unbeknownst to the parents, and it wasn't exactly that put it that way. So this family moved to a new house. Seen that storyline before, haven't we? And one of the youngest kids, who's like 6 or 7 in this movie, played wonderfully by the actress, I must say. She finds this teddy bear called Chauncey, and she's going around playing all these games and stuff, and it kind of looks, fairly friendly and stuff, not really too bad's happening. And then these games start to get a little bit darker, and his stepmom and her dad start to get a little bit cautious about it. And this is this Chansey, who's kind of an imaginary friend inside this bear, telling her to do these things. Now, the movie does use a lot of the theme of creativity and imagination, because her stepmom is kind of this artist, and she's sort of a very creative person herself. The movie plays on that theme. But after about an hour of nothing happening, the third act just goes in all sorts of silly directions, and I actually preferred the first hour, where hardly anything happened. It's a very, very slow burn, and then it sort of gets to Hellraiser Hellbound 2 territory for kids. Yes, it's not a very good film. I really did not like it. There was no real characters to get behind here. It's very CGI heavy. The jump scares are terrible, and it just felt like a kid's horror movie. But it wasn't. It was trying to be a little bit more clever than it was, put it that way. I hated the third act of this film. When we go into all this sort of labyrinth type deal, oh my god, I hated it. I mean, they were going inside the walls of the house and stuff, and it just wasn't for me. And I couldn't wait for this movie to end. I remember turning to my wife. I don't speak in the cinema. No, I'm not one of them, but I whispered to her going, "This movie's terrible." And she was like, "I know, I want it to end." Yeah. My second least favourite horror movie of the year, just behind No Way Up, and even that might be better than it if I think about it too much. I could easily swap them. So yeah, that is Imaginary. Not a good movie at all, from Blumhouse, who have a lot to answer for, I feel, lately. So yeah, that is Imaginary. Next up, we have a much better film, Immaculate, starring Sydney Sweeney, who is just basically hot off the press these days, isn't she? She's starring in a lot of things, and I thought she'd done a good job here. She kind of salvaged this film, I believe, because she got the script years ago, and then she helped sort of finance it and produce it and stuff. So well done to her for getting this off the ground. Now, this follows a young nun who is about to give her life to this convent, to God. And when she's there, weird things start to happen and stuff. And it's a very mysterious movie, all taking place around this haunting type convent with these weird nuns and stuff like that. And the third act just goes totally left field and batshit insane. And I absolutely loved the last 30 minutes of this movie. I thought it was an interesting film. Religious horror isn't usually my type of thing, but I think this worked really well. There was some jump scares that I just telegraphed. I think that's just becoming a common thing in movies these days. It takes a lot to throw me off with the jump scares, and maybe that's just me watching a lot of horror movies. I don't know, or maybe it's these directors just don't know how to do it. But the third act, man, it's just so worth watching. And the final scene of the movie was something quite spectacular from Sydney Sweeney. I thought she was a great protagonist in this film. And it's good to uncover the mystery of this convent, what's happening in this location of this building, as she uncovers it herself. You go along for the journey with her. And yeah, there's some gore in there that is unexpected as well. So yeah, this was very similar to the first Omen, which should be in this list, but like I said, I've done a whole Omen video, ranking and everything, which I'll leave down below. But this was a very, very similar film to the first Omen, but I preferred this one, so that is Immaculate. Next up, we have an Australian horror movie that is based on a true story, and it's more of a crime film, but it was quite a horrifying film, I must say, and that is Hounds of Love. Now, there's something about these Australian horror movies that just seem so realistic to me. Snowtown Murders is one, and this film reminded me of that quite a bit. This is about this couple who are kidnapping these young girls, well, like teenage girls, and sort of enticing them in, saying, "Do you want to ride to the town and stuff? Or we're just going to stop off at the house to get something." And next minute, they're tied up in their spare room, and they are basically raped by the both of them and eventually killed. And it all follows this young girl who has been kidnapped by them, and her mother is just searching the streets for them. But we get an insight of to what this couple are like, how they live, what they're doing when the girl's tied up in the next room. And I must say, the male out of the two was just this horrible bastard of a human being. I absolutely hated him. So, and you really wanted this girl to get out of this spare room that these two have her locked in. I just felt so bad for her. And these movies to me are more horrifying than a lot of other horror movies, because humans are real and humans are capable of the worst shit imaginable. That's why I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a very effective horror movie, because they're just human cannibals living in the outback. That works for me. You know, this is more scary than ghosts or monsters or goblins or whatever you want to call it. And this movie was very, very effective, I thought. So yeah, more Australian horror would be recommended down below in the comments. That would be very, very grateful. Thank you. So that is Hounds of Love. Next up, we have Late Night with the Devil. I was really looking forward to this one after seeing the trailer kind of come out of nowhere, and it said, oh, it's out in 2 months. And I was like, that's on my radar. Now, David Dastmalchian, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, he plays this TV host called Jack Delroy. I knew that name. And he has been the star of this 70s late night talk show. He's kind of dwindling a bit in the ratings, and he's trying to get up to his rival, and he's plans this big comeback on Halloween night after a tragic event in his life to do with his wife who died and stuff. And he wants to make a good comeback after grieving for so long, and he plans this big special show on Halloween night, and he's going to get all these people on, these special guests who are like people who perform exorcisms, you know, people who can talk to the dead, and a woman who claims to have this child with her, possessed by a demon and stuff, who like come on later in the show. Now, this is done as sort of a found footage type movie. It's not quite found footage, but it's like, it says it's a lost recording of the show that night. And we see David Dastmalchian talking to us like we are watching a late night talk show, basically. And he spoke to me in that movie like I'd been watching his show for years. He's always the side character in movies, but here he's the main focus, and I thought he'd done an absolutely splendid job as Jack Delroy here. The movie looks fabulous. It looks like it's from 1977, where this movie takes place. All the backgrounds and everything, the oranges, the browns, the yellows, it all just fits perfectly. There's some great characters in here, like Jack Delroy's assistant Gus, who's quite funny and stuff, and then you've got the crowd who are all laughing along with the show, and you're kind of laughing along with them. But then the movie just becomes a little bit more horrifying as it goes on, especially on the hour mark. Something kind of happens, and I was like, holy shit, this is getting good. So yeah, I absolutely loved this film. You know, I was invested from start to finish. I loved how it just felt like you were watching this late night talk show, but something dangerous was about to happen. It just felt like something different. A very unique movie, not something like I haven't seen before. If you can imagine the movie Joker, where Joker goes on to the Robert De Niro show, that's kind of what this movie felt like all the way along, and you're kind of on edge all the time, with a bit more of a horror aspect to it, of course. My biggest problem with this film was the last 10 minutes. I don't like the way this movie ended at all. I've heard people say they like the ending. For me, it just didn't work. It felt very Beau Was Afraid to me. Felt like it went into the art house style just a little bit there. But it's still probably my favourite horror movie of the year so far. And I have it in my top 5 of the overall movies of the year so far. I would definitely watch this again. I think it's a great movie, and maybe that ending will work for me a second time round. So I definitely recommend this film, guys, if you want something a little bit different. That is Late Night with the Devil. Next up, we have Abigail. Now, this is a movie where Twitter was just losing its shit over, and it got me hyped for the movie. So many people were saying how great this movie was, and I've got to say, going by the trailer, I was really, really excited to check this out. And it was fine. You know, I think I'm trying to learn that lesson now of Twitter just blowing movies up to, you know, I think my expectations are hardly ever met when Twitter blows a movie up. Apart from June 2, of course, and Top Gun Maverick. I mean, they were right there. But I thought this movie was a good 7 out of 10 film. It basically follows this group of criminals, which I like when we're surrounding ourselves with the antagonists, the villains, even though they are petty criminals. They're not full-on villains, basically, but they kidnap this young girl, and they are going to demand $50 million off her father, who is this big, rich drug lord. And that's when he's going to get his daughter back once they get the money. And they lock themselves in this house so no one knows where they are. However, unbeknownst to them, Abigail, this young girl they've kidnapped, is actually a vampire. And she starts to pick them off one by one. And it is a really fun movie. You know, I think some of the characters here were really good to be around. Melissa Barrera showing that she's a great lead actress again. Catherine Newton again here from Lisa and Frankenstein. She was a great character in this movie. And Dan Stevens absolutely stole the show as this arsehole who just didn't want to be told by anyone what to do. He didn't take orders from anyone. He was just going to do it his way, and that was that. And I loved his line delivery and stuff in this film. He was the best part of this movie. I thought the young girl who played Abigail done a great job as well. Some cool, gory kills at times in this movie. Some things happen to characters that you kind of don't expect, and they go down little different paths and stuff. My biggest problem with the movie was there was a few twists and turns along the way in the third act, but it kind of didn't know when to stop with them twists and turns and kind of dragged the ending along a little bit. I think this movie would have been a lot better paced overall if it just cut a little bit of time off, because it didn't need that many twists and turns at the end for me personally. But it is a fun enough time. I had a very good time with it. I just didn't love it as much as the internet did. But it was a good vampire flick. And we don't get too many vampire flicks these days compared to what we used to. So yeah, nice to get one there, and a good one at that. So that is Abigail. Next up, we have the first spider horror movie on this list, and this is a French film called Infested, which came to Shudder about a month ago. And I haven't seen too many spider horror movies, I've got to be honest. It's just a subgenre that I've never really delved into, and I don't really know if there's enough of them to think that that is an unpopular thing. I don't really hear too many people talk about spider subgenre horror movies, but we got 2 this year. I'm going to speak about the other one in just a minute. But this one is Infested. Like I said, this is a French movie. It all takes place in this French apartment block. And these spiders have sort of infested the building. And they're sort of taking over, basically, and sort of showing how they work in a natural habitat inside this apartment block, and people are being killed off one by one by these spiders that are just taking over these rooms. And I think Sebastian Vinicic, I think the director is called, who's going to be doing one of the new Evil Dead films, done a great job with this movie in the directing department, because I like the way he used the use of mirrors in this movie. So a character will be brushing her teeth or something, she'll go down to spit the toothpaste out, but as she does that, lots of spiders will be coming in through the vents. And you know that there's a lot of spiders in the room with this person. And for someone with arachnophobia, that really played on my, spider senses a little bit. I was looking around the room, I was looking up the walls, I was scratching myself. It was one of them that it kind of got to me with the spiders when they were on screen. Some of them were done with CGI, but you didn't really notice it because there was so many spiders on screen there. Another great moment in this movie was when these characters had to go through this corridor where it was just inhabited by these spiders. And the camera sort of done this big spiraling movement to show what they were actually having to run through here. I liked how some of the spiders were getting bigger, bigger, larger than life as the movie went on, and it just became more and more dangerous for these characters. My biggest problem with the movie was the actual main protagonists of the film. I didn't like them. They were unlikable arseholes. And I just couldn't latch on to any of them. I didn't care what happened. I was more bothered about the older people in the apartment, who you hardly see for more than 1 or 2 scenes, because they were the vulnerable ones. They were the people who'd done nothing wrong, really. And I was more caring more about them characters more than the main protagonist. But overall, it was a good spider subgenre horror movie, I thought. So that is Infested. Next up, we have Arcadian, a movie that really surprised me, actually. And this stars Nicolas Cage, Jaden Martell from the It movie, and I forgot the name of the other character, but he was great as well as the other younger brother. Now, this is very similar to A Quiet Place. Basically, the world has ended. It's a post-apocalyptic world that we live in. And these people can do what they want throughout the day, but at night, they have to barricade themselves in their homes and do whatever means necessary it is to basically keep out these monsters that come at night. So instead of coming when a sound is made, like in A Quiet Place, they just come when the sun comes down, basically. And every night is a struggle where these characters have to lock themselves in and basically just hear these monsters just trying to scrape through their door, basically. So they've got to do everything they can to barricade their house up and, you know, have a great defense unit there for when the sun comes back up. Now, I thought this had a very post-apocalyptic feel to it. The world just felt like it had been ravaged. Everyone was one man for himself and stuff. But there was a bit of a love story going on with one of the brothers and this girl who lives in the farm across the road. And that felt like there was a bit of hope for these characters in a world full of hopelessness, if you like. So I like that part of the movie. I think one of the brothers who's involved in the romance got a little bit more screen time than the other one. They sort of missed the balance there because it does feel like a family dynamic film, but it kind of goes one way with one of the brothers and leaves the other one behind. However, that is a small nitpick. I think Nicolas Cage took a bit of a backseat here. You know, don't come here expecting a big Nicolas Cage event. It's not quite that, but he was fine when he was in the movie, and you know what he brought to it. It was just a more serious performance from him. But the best thing about this film was when these monsters come. I thought they were really creepy. They had these unique abilities, really. There's one moment where one of the monsters, there's like this little hole in the house and it's stretching right through, trying to get this character who's just sitting there. And yeah, I loved the creature design on them. They felt very, very dangerous. You can see why these people won't go out at night, because they will be ripped apart in seconds. But this all makes for a great action-packed third act. Like I said, guys, this movie was a very surprising one for me. It's one of my favourite horror movies of the year. I had a great time with it, and it's 90 minutes. It absolutely flies by. So yeah, definitely worth checking out Arcadian. So that is Arcadian. Next up we have Tarot. I called it Tarot, but apparently this movie says these cards are pronounced tarot. So there you go. I learn something new every day when I watch this film. And this is about a bunch of teenagers who stay in this house and they find this card deck of tarot cards. And one of them reads out all the characters' fortunes, and they are then killed off one by one in a Final Destination style movie, where it is made to look like each one of these characters has suffered an accidental death, when really it's a curse that's been put on them because of these cards. Yeah, this is a film that you kind of just see all the time with a different theme around it. Instead of something, it's a card deck theme. I did like the Final Destination style kill that it went for, you know, the invisible slasher, if you like. But my big problem with these kills is, apart from one or two, they are off screen. You know, it doesn't really go for the gore in this movie. It kind of just cuts away almost every time, and it's going for that PG-13, 12A rating, whatever you want to call it, aimed at teenagers. Now, I think this movie would have been a lot more effective if it actually went for the gore fest. But yeah, it kind of shit the bed there. Also, the characters in this movie are very unlikable. In fact, they're not even unlikable. They're just nothing. They're cardboard characters. You don't care about them. They are just there for cannon fodder. And this movie follows a very similar formula. By what I mean when I say there's a different theme on it, it's the same storyline, basically, what lots of horrors do these days. Characters find something, and then they are on a downward path, really, because they're all being killed off one by one. Then they find someone who explains everything to them, and they get a little bit of positivity in trying to beat this thing, and then it comes to a climactic finish. Yeah, we've seen that a hell of a lot of times. Now, I've heard people say this is the worst movie of the year. I don't quite agree with that. I've seen worse horror movies than this. Even in this video, Imaginary was worse for me. I had a little bit of fun with it. It's an easy watch. And there was one moment where, like, one thing I'll say before I get to that moment is, each person who gets a certain tarot card will have a different demon coming to them. So one of them gets this hell priest, and before they are killed, this hell priest appears. I thought that was a cool aspect of the movie. And one character gets this jester type character, and he gets in an elevator and there's this jester following him. Each floor he gets off of the elevator. I thought that was kind of creepy. That was the best part of the movie for me. But yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, jump scare city, you know, that you just telegraphed them a mile off. So yeah, it's just one of them films that will not be remembered too well, and I'll probably never watch it again. So that is Tarot. Next up, I'm going to talk a little bit about a franchise here. Now, I will be doing a full franchise ranking on these when the Chapter 3 movie comes out, and I've still got 1 to review, but I have reviewed 2 of these on the channel, which I'll leave down below. Now, the first one is the 2008 film The Strangers. Now, when I first watched this back in the day, there was a lot of hype surrounding this film, that it was super scary, like nothing we'd seen before, a home invasion movie with a difference. And I just didn't like the movie when I watched it back in 2008. And I thought my mind might change here. With Chapter 1 coming out, I wanted to check out this and Pray at Night, which I'll speak about in a minute. But wow, I hated this movie even more this time. I just do not like this film whatsoever. Now, granted, there is some good sound design here. The costume design is good. I like the look of the strangers. And some of the directing in the movie worked. You know, the way it was shot and stuff was quite effective. Other times, not so much. But I just did not like the 2 main characters in this film, Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman's character. They're kind of arguing at the start of the movie, but it doesn't delve into that too much. There is no real reason for it. And you just don't get behind these characters. Scott Speedman is never, you know, looking like he's scared or anything. There's no emotion coming out of him. He's just like, oh yeah, well, these guys are breaking in, so I think we better go in the next room and try and find a way out. And, you know, he's not believable. I thought it was a terrible performance from him. And Liv Tyler is just an actress I cannot get behind. I hate her soft-spoken voice, and she does it so much in this film. Scott Speedman's character is called James, and all she does is go, James. James. Where are you, James? James. She'd done it in the Incredible Hulk. I was about to say the Invisible Man then. The Incredible Hulk with Bruce Banner's character. She's just going, Bruce, with her lips pouting them as she says the name. And I'm just like, stop trying to look so sexy and cute. It's not working. You are not the best actress. I just don't like her. And I hated it in this movie. So I didn't care what happened to either of these characters. The jump scares I seen coming from every single angle. A lot of the movie is just characters walking around the house and the strangers popping their heads around the corners, and you'll see a jump scare after like 10 minutes. The ending is ridiculous. I just don't get the ending at all. And it's just not an enjoyable film for me. It's a dull, boring ass movie, and it has way many more negatives than positives. The small hand of positives it has are outweighed by the massive handful of negatives. So that is The Strangers. Next up, we have The Strangers Pray at Night. Now, this was actually a first time watch for me. I kind of avoided this film after not really loving The Strangers. But I have heard a lot of people speak about this film and how much they enjoyed it. But I had also heard how much people enjoyed The Strangers, so I wasn't expecting too much. However, this movie was levels ahead of The Strangers. I had such a great time with this. This is just a movie that is so well paced and is the total opposite of how The Strangers works. Now, I say that, but what I mean by that is we're not waiting around for things to happen. The strangers are just going for it. It's almost like a slasher movie. There's a lot more body count in this film. The first film only had a 2-person body count. This one's got about 4 or 5, but it's just so more well paced. You know, the strangers feel more dangerous in this, and maybe because they've been doing it for years, they're just so great at it now. I thought the jump scares and the creepiness was a lot more effective here. I liked the characters. You know, one of the characters, the main girl in this, is kind of a bit of a bitch. It kind of reminded me of the girl in the Evil Dead remake, who's not this perfect character, but you get behind her anyway. And there's a pool scene in this, which has become very infamous now, and I had a great time with that scene. I also love one of the scenes where this guy was stuck in a car, and the guy with the sack on his head just gets in the car and sort of sits next to him and stuff. I thought that was such a creepy scene. It's only an 85-minute long movie. It just absolutely flies by, and I had a ton of fun with it. I just liked how much sped up it was, how much fast-paced it was, and it helps when you've got characters that you like in it as well. So that is The Strangers, Pray at Night, a vast improvement on the first movie. Next up, we had The Strangers Chapter 1. Now, going into this one, after watching The Strangers 2008, I watched the trailer again, and I realised that it looked like the exact same film. So I thought, oh God, I'm in for another boring 90 minutes here. And it is a very similar film, you know, almost shot for shot at times with what it goes for, where certain things happen in the movie, they kind of happen at the same time as the first film. Very similar ending, apart from one little thing here and there that did get me looking forward to Chapter 2. But what I liked about this movie a hell of a lot more than the 2008 original is the characters. Now, I really enjoyed the couple in this movie. I cared about them. I wanted them to get out of this situation, and they were just people you get behind, you latch onto, and they felt very innocent. They were in love. They had lots of future plans together, unlike the other two who were just at each other's throats and just being assholes. So that was the big turning point for me in this movie. Also, the film is broken up a little bit here. It all doesn't just take place in the one house. You know, we go into the little weird town around the house a couple of times here, so that broke up the movie a little bit. And yeah, I just moved at a nicer pace for me, really. Yeah, it's a very similar film to the first one, but I just enjoyed it a little bit more. I just can't put my finger on why, but I put it down to the two characters, although I am scratching my head as to why, because it's a very similar film, but it just worked for me a hell of a lot more than the first one. And that last little bit at the end got me looking forward to Chapter 2. However, there are some dumb decisions the characters make here that kind of grated on me, even though I like them. One is kind of unforgivable towards the end, what a character makes. Also, there's some horror tropes in here with one of the guy in this film, he's got an asthma inhaler at the start of the film. Wonder what's going to happen there. I wonder if he's going to drop that, or he needs it at a pivotal point. Yeah. Also, the opening scene has a character with a sore leg getting chased. Seen that one a lot of times, haven't we? But I don't think this film is as bad as everyone is going on about. But I think it's more fans of the first film who like the first film that didn't like this. But for me, it's the other way around. But I can understand why. If you're a fan of the first film, you didn't like this one. But for me, I hate the first film, and this one kind of worked for me. And it's weird because I'm against shot-for-shot remakes, really. And even though it's not shot-for-shot, it's basically the same movie. But The Omen had a shot-for-shot remake in 2006, which I was fully against in my review. But I like The Omen. So yeah, maybe the difference there is that I didn't like the first Strangers, and I like this one. Enough explaining from me. That is The Strangers Chapter 1. And last but definitely not least in this list is the movie Sting, the other spider horror movie I was talking about. Now, this is basically an alien spider who invades this apartment block, believe it or not. Yeah, it's the same kind of storyline as Infested, but here we just have one spider. I think it's funny when movies do that. They have a very similar storyline. They come out in the same year. This, Infested, the first Omen, Immaculate. And remember in 1997 when we got Dante's Peak and Volcano? Yeah, it does happen more often than you think. But yeah, this one stars Alalia Brown. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But she has just played the young Furiosa in the Mad Max Furiosa movie. And she's in that movie a lot longer than I thought. But she was a great actress in this. She's kind of got a conflicting personality, but she's definitely a talented actress. And she gets this she gets this pet spider called Sting. And she doesn't know it's like this deadly venomous alien. And as the movie goes on, Sting starts taking out bugs, and then it starts taking out pets, and then it starts taking out humans. and starts picking these people off in the apartment block one by one. And I thought this movie was going to get a little bit more ridiculous as the spider grew into this giant, larger-than-life spider, but it actually felt more dangerous as the movie went on. So yeah, this felt like an 80s creature movie throwback, kind of something like Critters there. That's what it felt like, but with a giant spider instead of these gremlin-looking things. Yeah, so I quite enjoyed this one. I liked it a little bit more than Infested. It's a movie that flies by. It's well-paced. I just had a really fun time with it. So yeah, that is Sting, definitely worth checking out. My biggest negative with it was that it didn't really play on my arachnophobia like Infested did. I was scratching my skin a lot more watching Infested. But overall, still a very fun time. So that is Sting. Hey guys, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you want to see my full reviews for any of these movies I talked about, I'll leave them down below. If I have reviewed it, I think I've reviewed nearly all of these movies, so I'll leave all them in the link down below if you want to check them out. What did you think of these films? Please do let me know in a link down below. Hopefully the next episode of this won't be as long as the distance it was between the last one. So yeah, look out for all the Friday the 13th reviews coming. I can't wait to do all them. And don't forget to check out the Omen reviews and stuff and the Ghostbusters playlist, which I spoke about at the start of the video. Thanks so much, guys. You take care, and I'll see you on the next video.